Well, hello everybody. Now we're taking you first of all to the very popular Abbey Hill rally at Yeovil in Somerset. Each year the local showground is packed with many historical vehicles and items, including over 100 vintage farm tractors. On view here we hope to show you many of the old-time workhorses that spent the best years of their life carrying out the many heavy jobs that they were designed to do. As you see here, tractors come in all sizes, some of them looking remarkably like models, but I can assure you they are the genuine article. These smaller tractors were designed for use in the smaller plots of market gardens and other horticultural areas. This little gem here is a Trojan tractor. The young lad driving comes from a very enthusiastic family of tractor owners. I think it's safe to say that most of these tractors are owned by enthusiasts in farming. Many of them actually have in the past or still do work on farms. And to bring an old timer to the rally field and chat to members of the public who recall their lifetime with similar machines is a very pleasurable way to spend the weekend. It certainly is great when the wife and family is interested as well. This year we have a large number of tractors that were the brainchild of the great Harry Ferguson. This Irish genius felt that to purchase a tractor and the large number of implements to be towed behind it was not good economy. He set about designing a three-point linkage which was attached to the rear of the tractor, whereby implements could be attached and operated from the driver's seat. Thus it ruled out the need to employ another operative on the trailer. His first attempts were fitted to the rear of a Model T Ford, but later designed and built, as we see here, the very popular little grey Fergie. Fergusons were tied up with David Browns and Fords in the early days, when the firm were eventually taken over by the Roots Group. Then the ever-popular little grey Fergie reached its heyday. Another of our miniatures arriving now and very happily driven by a lady driver. It's amazing the power and the workload that these little miniatures could cope with. Compact tractors, I believe they used to call them, or probably still do. That one's dating back a long way, back in the 60s. Here we have the old Model A Ferguson, one of the very early ones, the Ferguson Brown, when they were part-owned by David Brown. A very rare machine is this, and we're very pleased to see one at Abbey Hill this weekend. Fitted with a side valve engine, this one. You can clearly see the linkage on the back now, fitted with a plough. All that can be operated from the driver's seat. The weight of that on the back helped the tractor, of course, to cope with soft ground, because the extra weight gave it grip. Well, I did say there would be some rare tractors here, and this is one of them. This is known as an MSW 550, built in 1972. Equipped with its loader, among the 100-odd tractors here, believe me, there's a vast array of interesting and unusual machinery. A Massey Ferguson here, the latter part of the Ferguson era, when they were tied in with the famous Massey Harris group, And of course, on this occasion, built a much bigger tractor than the little grey Fergie. This is the Model 65. Harry Ferguson didn't want to build big tractors. He felt that to build a small tractor and prove that they could do the job, well, that was his ambition anyway. His staff disagreed with him to some effect. This old machine here, it's got the rare name of Wickham, another rarity. Built in 1960, was used for towing barges. Many and varied were the uses of tractors. I know not where the actual location of the barges and the canal were, but he did a long day's work, no doubt, with headlights fitted on the front. And it could have been quite busy, as he also has a horn for giving warning to pedestrians. So it would be a little bit more interesting if we could catch our driver sometime and learn a little bit about it. And these people are always ready to talk to you about their machines. So it isn't just a case of watching the ring parade. You can go back to the section where they stand, and if you find the owner, he'll be only too pleased to talk to you. Number 27 here is another Ferguson. This is the FE35. They built a slightly bigger engine, as I said, contrary to the wishes of Harry, but they painted it gold. This is the gold engine Fergie. And a much more modified cowling on the front. So very, very popular were these grey Fergies. So easy to drive and economic to run. Many a farmer in those early days, back in the sort of 50s, didn't own a car, and having sold his horse and cart, he used his Fergie to go to the dart match. Here we have the light loader. Push that into a bale of hay and pick it up. Or you could even attach the manure bucket on the front and do your bit of dung spreading or hauling, whatever. Just another more of attachment to the Ferguson tractor. Another immaculate version of the Ferguson. This is the TED, D standing for diesel. Several engines used by Fergusons. At one time, when with Fords, they used a 4-cylinder engine, which was half of the old famous Ford V8. But I think the most economic engine was the 3-cylinder Perkins diesel. Carrying a very unusual load on the back now, in its 3-point linkage bucket. But of course they were designed to carry all sorts of things, especially the milk churns when you went down to the track and put your milk out for the lorry to collect next day. Instead of having to hitch a trailer and pull it, you just load it up and off you went. Over to the red and grey now. This is the Massey Ferguson Era. And I'm not being sexist when I say that because of their light handling, they were very popular with the farmers' wives and staff, who lady drivers, and quite a gentle little vehicle to control. the weight of the load on the back could be transferred to the back wheels to give it extra grip. This was called the draft control. It really was a clever linkage, and not only, of course, Ferguson used it. Every tractor on the road today has got a similar linkage and their own individual items to attach to the rear. So that genius really started a trend in tractors. Nice close-up of the linkage there with nothing attached. The raising and lowering can be governed by the use of the lever down there on your right hand. We're back to the old Brown Ferguson Model A now. Aroused a lot of interest here at the Abbey Hill Rally. We don't see them very often. When they brought it out first, they painted it black. Harry liked black tractors, but his staff tended to disagree with him, and eventually they turned it over to the very, very common sight now, the battle grey. Until, of course, we reached the Massey Fergusons when they put the top half in their traditional red. That famous name, we see it everywhere. There you can see the levers there for raising and lowering the 3-point linkage, the gear lever, the low range lever, of course the engine there with a self-starter. There are the brake pedals for left and right wheel. Close up there of the diesel motor. And that little lever with a circle behind it, that is the power takeoff, whereby you can drive other machinery. There it is, the power takeoff lever. Built on the old traditional tractor lines of those days, where you just sat astride the thing rather than sitting in it, as you do with the modern luxurious machines we see on the farm today. And the old Model A there has got a starting handle in the front. There she is, that old side valve engine of the Model A. The only way to start it, swing the handle. Not a bad job on a cold morning. The gentleman leaning on it now is a local fellow around here known as the West Country Magpie. Such is his collection of agriculture implements. He's in a very interesting program on the television some years back. You'll always find him around the agricultural side of a steam rally. Now you can see how it all works. Or can you? There's the gold engine, the slightly bigger engine, and a very proud owner who's been to many, many rallies, judging by the number of plaques on his board. In addition to the typical little grey Fergie, they made a slightly narrower and lower model for various orchard work, etc. Nice view here. The linkage system, the driver's eye view of his rather economic array of dials. But he's been shopping, he's got himself a steering wheel glove to give a little bit of comfort. An added extra, I can assure you. It's our little barge tower back again, the Wickham. One of our small crawler tractors. And there, having lowered his loader, yet another Ferguson. Yes, quite capable of lifting heavy bales or whatever you fit it onto the front and cut out a lot of the hard work on the farm. Now we couldn't find any details on this one. It's something used in the horticultural line, judging by the bin on the back there. But what an interesting bit of machinery that is. Back to our little Trojan now with its trailer and water barrel. Water, I can assure you. What a lovely way to bring a young enthusiast on. Buy him a little tractor, and one day, no doubt, he'll be coming along with something bigger. You can almost imagine a conversation going on there, can't you? Wonder what we'd do when we grow up. Quite a number of farmers were rather disappointed when Massey Ferguson painted red on their tractors. So proud were they of the old battleship grey, and that little name, Grey Fergie, became worldwide. That's the Mark III Trojan, that one, with lots of equipment attached to it. No, the lineup is not just another load of old tractors. There's an individual interest to be found in every one in the lineup here or in any other show. Each and every one of them old enough to have an interesting history. We're going over to Ford now. The Fordson Major. Two Fordson Majors. The number 82, the latter one, that's just the post-war Major. That they redesigned the old standard Fordson and called it the Tall Major or the Tall Mary. Another of our Fordson Majors here. Fordson, of course, were the main tractor producer for Great Britain before the war. It was only during the war, when we had a lot of lease-lend tractors come over, that farmers realised there were other makes about. But Fordson have always produced a very good, reliable tractor. And the Major here was built in its thousands. That's the diesel version. Still plenty of Fergies just going across the camera there. Interesting one going over there, the Case Dex, the orange one, followed by yet another Fordson Major. You only had to visit a couple of shows to be able to pick out these various makes of tractors by their colour, because they didn't produce them as they do cars in a variety of colours. Fordson started off before the war with an orange tractor, but they become too conspicuous from the air, and they changed it to a dark green. And when they produced the old Tall Major, they produced it a very nice dark blue, and then afterwards this lighter blue. Another Fordson Major, but different again, because this one's been fitted with an Atlas compressor. Because it's not only agriculture that used the tractors, they were used in industry. And here she is, the famous old standard Ford's bog standard vehicle, plain and simple if ever there was one. Only one pedal to bother about. On your right hand side there was the clutch pedal you pushed down. If you wanted to brake, you pushed it right down a bit further. 3-speed gearbox. When you started in the morning, it used to take about 10 minutes before you could get in gear. A hand throttle and a 4-cylinder side valve engine. Simple, but reliable. Now then, the name BMC, this is the Nuffield tractor. Nuffield, that was the Morris car factory, because of Lord Nuffield owning it. They opened up a tractor factory just after World War II to put some work into the factory that had been producing World War II military vehicles. And a very successful tractor it was too. This one of our imports from America, the famous Allis-Chalmers. Quite slender looking tractor, some of the later Allis-Chalmers, but believe me, they were very, very tough. That's the Allis-Chalmers WC. It's very unusual. It's got a wider wheelbase than normal. I remember the first little Allis-Chalmers coming over during the World War II on what was known as the lease-lend agreement, where America helped us out with a lot of machinery because we needed more agriculture here because we couldn't import it. We needed more tractors. Of course, the land girls were driving them. But most of the War Agriculture Committee for the land girls were equipped with the old standard Fordson, which was a fair old lump for them to drive. But some of the farmers had the little Allis-Chalmers, and they liked them much better. Now that West Country Magpie I spoke to you about, he's got a couple of tractors here. There's one of them, the old 1920s International, followed by a later International, driven by his two sons. These tractors, very basic in appearance. An International being an American firm, but they did assemble in this country in later years. And if you ever get an International with the Series B in front of its lettering, that was one that was assembled in Great Britain. Have a look at the grass cutting machine. A lot of these were built, of course, for horse-drawn and then converted later to be pulled on behind the tractor. Very pleasant sound when you lived in a village to hear the old hay cutting going on. You knew you could go to the haymaking field and enjoy yourself then, doing a little job around the raking around the side and get a free glass of cider at the end of it. There are Nuffields. Here's another Fortune Major with a bit of purpose-built roll bar and big mud guards on the back. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if this one doesn't get employed pulling one of those charming carnival floats that we love seeing down here in the southwest. Another of our very famous standard Fortunes coming. The property of Brian Lovell, towing its water cart. Useful chap to have on the rally field is Brian, because he just doesn't come there and do a parade and stand still between the parades. He gets the old water cart out and goes around feeding water to the thirsty steam engines that are on the field. Not only in this country, but very much travelled in Holland, Belgium, and Germany. Brian Lovell and his famous tractor, Henry. That's a wartime version. You can tell by the mudguards. After about 1942, they put those narrow mudguards on to save metal. Before the war, they had a full width metal mudguard around that big pair of back wheels. The first of our Marshalls. Now this is one of the most reliable tractors ever built. They followed a German design of the old Lanz Bulldog. And then Marshalls of Gainsborough built this interesting economic tractor. Let's wait a minute while the International Harvester comes across. That was the model B250, and once again another Ferguson. I was saying about that interesting Marshall tractor. It only had a single cylinder diesel engine, with thump, thump, thump all day long. A bit boring to listen to, but were they reliable? This is the later one here. I think that's the Series 3. When they changed the colour to orange. And that's fitted with a Bolton heavy winch. You can see, just by the number on the front, a little tap shape arrangement. You used to unscrew that and screw up a bit of paper type substance, and then screw it back in again and strike the end of the tap end there. There was a little pin, and that would fire the cylinder up. And leave it running all day. Another Allis-Chalmers, this time a track laying one, crawler. I think that's got the Model U engine in. Of course, the Model U Allis-Chalmers was once the holder of the world speed record. But not with tracks on it, wasn't. And of course, some of these tractors haven't been painted up in their glorious new suits, as found dead original. I like to see them that way. A couple of tractor spotters there. Another of our big dark green Marshalls. Followed behind by one fitted with tracks, and these went under the name of Fowler because Fowler's took over the firm of Marshalls. This is the Fowler crawler. Very powerful, very useful tractors. The only disadvantage was they were very slow on the road. That I can assure you. That one doesn't come very far, but the owner up there, our old friend, he shaved before he left home this morning. Another of our American entries here, a tractor that we see so many of in this country now. Very famous they are too, the John Deere. Easily picked out with that sharp pale green. They too having a horizontal engine, but twin cylinder. And yet another forged major, this time very rare, painted red. No doubt the owner's choice. This time, in the factory blue, another Fordson. Fitted, as you can see, with a 3-point linkage. Fordson got the idea from Harry Ferguson. It took a long time for tractors to be 100% fitted with these 3-point linkages, when you think that it was way back in the 20s when Harry first thought of the idea. But judging by the number of tractors we see it shows now, especially the Fergusons, it certainly is a credit to him. That's the Caravan and the Old International belonging to our West Country Magpie. He always brings along a good display, but at home I can assure you he's got masses and masses of agricultural items. Very interesting person. And here's a very interesting little setup here that was actually a prize winner at the show for a static display. We've got the Ferguson tractor, of course, with the Roadworks, an old Barford roller in the back there. They had everything here, the old coal brazier, the workman's hut. Yes, we know you're a Ferguson. Another of his many uses. They even had an old toilet rigged up here, not the modern portables that we see today. But what a fine display that was. A touch of humor. Yes, if you care to visit, or if you live in this part of the country, down here in the southwest, this is the place to come and see your tractors. Right, we are going over to another location now, where we can enjoy the company of the type of prime movers used long before the tractor was even dreamed of. Heavy horses. Heavy horses go back many, many years, and fortunately are still with us. Not so much now in the haulage business, but giving us demonstrations at shows throughout the country. However, there are still a few breweries using the heavy horse-drawn dray, and lucky people in those areas will hear that old familiar clop, clop of the large hooves A sound that stirs nostalgia in the older horse lover. Now we have three main horse breeds in Britain, four if you include the popular French import, the Percheron. There's the Shire, which is probably the most common and is the tallest horse in the world, averaging 17 hands high. Shire's origins go back to the Old English black horse, which in turn came from the great horses that were given the hard task of carrying the knights of old in shining armour. When its daily use turned to a more friendly occupation, that of agriculture, it was bred to become even bigger. Another of our heavies is a Suffolk Punch. That's the native of East Anglia. That horse too derived from the great horses and later combined with the local trotters, the Norfolk Cobs. Easy to pick out with being chestnut in colour and without the usual feathers round its heels. Now the Scottish survivor of the heavy horse breeds is the lovely Clydesdale. Now to distinguish the Clydesdale, we saw one a little earlier, you look for the abundance of white feather, as they call it, up the inside leg. These horses stem from the Flemish stock and were bred to cope with the heavy haulage work in the Lanarkshire coal mines. And also in the use of general timber haulage. Of course, the Percheron is one of the most famous of horse breeds. They are dapple grey in appearance with very little feather. Very attractive showpiece indeed. And they're very popular in Britain and the States. Ah, these fine animals always draw a good crowd. When you think of the hours of work put into polishing all that brass, the old horse carries it round with the greatest of ease, whereas if you tried to put that lot on your back, I'm afraid you'd be just about immobile. Look at the size of them. You can sense the power as they come around there. The relationship between man and horse is unique. I don't think any other animal has helped man through the ages in the quest for power and progress like the heavy horse. Yet, despite their massive strength, they possess a gentleness of nature, so gentle that they could be managed by a young child. And the kids love to go in the ring after the parade because quite often the commentator will line them up in the middle and invite people to come in and have a look at them and take a few photographs. If you do that, be careful. Don't put your feet under the hooves of those big horses. They won't notice it, but you will. Just look at the size of that. It's all muscle. And to train them, once you've got one horse trained, quite often they will train another horse alongside it, and the younger horse will follow the movements and the pattern of the old horse, and they learn their trade together. So faithful, so reliable. Truly a great and lovable animal is the horse. Two of our heavies here making very light work of that bit of machinery. Pulling one of the carts here, and of course in those days there were wagons and puts and drays and traps. Not forgetting the old dung putt. And still used, as I said today, by people here like Weston Cider and several of the breweries. Wonderful showpieces, wonderful adverts for their wares. What a lovely sight. course, in their working day, they wouldn't have been decked out with all that brass, although quite a few did carry a certain amount of decoration. But these showpieces, I'm sure they enjoy coming to a show like this and showing off to the crowd. Very well behaved, beautiful creatures. The horse and cart, something we see very little of now, but back in my young days it was the most common form of transport around our villages. In fact, we could tell which farmer 'twas coming just by the sound of his particular horse and cart. Now you tell the sound of his car as he comes along now, don't you? Times have changed, they've speeded up a bit, but how lovely to be able to go to shows like this and reminisce over the past and the beauty of the past with the heavy horses. Well, we're talking about agricultural equipment. This is something different. We're going to have a look at an array now of various items of stuff used on the farm, and quite a lot of the stuff here was used by the sheep shearers. You would think you're going for a haircut when you looked at that array there, and when you work with these sheep shearing people, you've got to get used to all sorts of fancy names like clippers and daggers and wide combs and grinders and hand shears, etc. And it's all driven by the little stationary engine. Little stationary engine by R.A. Lister of Dursley in Gloucester. Will it start? Of course it will. The Lister D, I suppose, safe to say the most common of all stationary engines. And Lister too produced a lot of agricultural machinery, including many of the items here used in sheep shearing. It's not the sort of thing we see every day, is it, sheep shearing? One has to go to shows like this now to see it going on, because wool isn't the common commodity now that it was, what with so many man-made fibres, and now sheep shearing is, I think, more a novelty than a necessity. You go to some of the big shows and see some of those lads over from Australia, it really is worthwhile to see the speed in which they can deprive the poor sheep of its jacket. All done by belts and 90-degree drives, driven by an old stationary engine. It had to be that way long before the use of electricity. There it is, the finished article. I don't know how they sheared the sheep hundreds of years ago, but it must be a very old business, sheep shearing. Wool being hundreds of years old in that use. And here we've got a nice close-up of a milk cooler. This takes me back, the old milk cooler, when I used to deliver newspapers to the local farms and look inside the dairy there and see the farmer's wife with her lovely white overall on and rosy face and that milk cooler going in the background. Ah, there's lots of nostalgia when you come to these shows. Pleasant memories. Our milk was delivered in those days by a lady who come round the door with her churn, and she used to measure it out with the measures. No milk bottles on our doorstep. What is it, Mum? Go on, tell him. And so the party's over. At least the ring parade is. The tractors and drivers will return to their section, some to remain standing, others to connect up the various pieces of old machinery, reminding the many visitors here of how it all was back in the days of their ancestors. To some, pleasant memories of their working life. Rallies such as this take part throughout our country for a very long season. They are, without doubt, huge outdoor museums, places to bring the family and show them how mankind has progressed from the power of the horse to the power of the internal combustion engine, man's relationship with animal and machine, to benefit all through applying such skills to agriculture. Farewell.